The use of the term isolationism is much like the use of the term anti-Semitism. Anyone who says, oh, I don't like what the Israeli state is doing, I think that we should not support that, is an anti-Semite. Anyone who suggests that our forces positioned all over the world are no longer protecting us, in fact, they're worse than tripwires, they're increasingly catalysts for conflict. You know, we talked about the 23,000 troops that we have in Syria and Iraq and Jordan and the Persian Gulf, and we can't protect them. And what are they protecting? They're not protecting anything. The people in those countries want us to leave. With the potential exception of Jordan, but I rather think privately they'd like us to go too. You've got a problem everywhere there are U.S. forces right now. Inside Germany, the people most interested in keeping our forces in Germany are the store owners outside the various military bases who profit enormously from the U.S. military presence. But the Germans, of course, like the Japanese, have all been absolved of the responsibility and the obligation to protect themselves. This, of course, was Donald Trump's point in his first administration. These people are rich and wealthy and effective. Why are we subsidizing defense for them? They can do it for themselves. He was right. That's not isolationism. That's rationality. And again, it's back to this business of vanity, national narcissism. How can you admit that you're not vital to everybody everywhere all the time? And it's sort of like every admiral in the Navy wants to stand on the quarter deck of the pilot deck of the Nimitz aircraft carrier with the wind blowing through his hair, and he's leading the Nelsonian Jutland Midway fleet into battle. Well, those days are over. Nobody wants to come to terms with it. We haven't even begun to appreciate just how lethal all of the various precision guided munitions and capabilities are as they are distributed across the country. I mean, look at the Houthis. They're not even a nation state. And with precision-guided missiles at their disposal, they've shut down traffic in the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf and elsewhere. They actually put an aircraft carrier out of business for a while. Everything has changed, but we have not.
And see, I actually argue that there is a significant cost, in addition to everything you just said, that weakens our national security. And one of the rare points of this interview, Jennifer Griffin actually asked a very pertinent question, and watch the difficulty Austin has of answering it.
Senator J.D. Vance has been one of the loudest opponents of aid to Ukraine, arguing that the U.S. defense industrial base can't produce enough to keep supporting Ukraine and Israel. Does he have a point?
We've seen an increase in production in artillery shells, anti-tank weapon systems, and a number of things. Our industrial base has picked up the pace. They are expanding production.
Okay, so it's picked up the pace and it's expanding production. That's technically a true statement. It's definitely more than it was. However, the administration officials in just a month ago actually acknowledged just how low we actually are.
Ukraine was running short of air defense interceptors. So I sat down with my team and I said, where are we sending Patriot missiles and AMRAAM missiles around the world in the next 12 months? And I was told there's a whole list of countries we're sending them to. And I said, take every single one of those missiles, every one, and send them to Ukraine. That was not an easy thing to do. It required us to get our allies and partners to come along. Frankly, it required our bureaucracy to come along. And we are currently working on a substantial package, pulling together a range of different capabilities that we are going to try to get out the door before the end of this month.
He's admitting that we are so short on interceptor missiles that all of our 17, as it turns out, people who have purchased our stuff across the globe had to do without so that we could send them all to Ukraine. That was before things started ramping up in Israel, and potentially now that's going to get even more if there's a strike into Iran. And then it's going to potentially open-ended things. So already we're in a situation where we're dangerously low on that. Austin himself also said around that same time, there's not enough ATACMS or British or French missiles to sustain an attack that the Ukraine side wanted to launch into Russia. So you have Austin himself admitting we don't have enough of the key weapon system. So it seems to me that following this course of action of the so-called not isolationism is costing us seriously that could undermine our own national security if we get into a fight.
Keep something in mind. Russia does have the legacy from the Soviet state of having been a war mobilization industrial complex. Everything Stalin did during his tenure before World War II was designed to fight World War II. He began that process in 1929, 30, and 31. It cost millions of lives, was sometimes counterproductive, but ultimately they built this scientific industrial base designed to produce tens of thousands of everything. So the Russians have an appreciation for this. And when they essentially went through the breakup period, they did preserve certain capabilities, and their culture supports this. It's not difficult to mobilize the Russian people and move them in a particular direction because they have the experience of having done that in the past. That doesn't mean they want to do it now, but it's just simply a statement of fact. Russia is a continental power. Their power is on land, not sea, and they don't need much sea power. All they need is a fleet of submarines that can sink other people's ships, and they've got that. They've got lots of missiles and rockets that can reach out to sea and destroy any number of conventional surface vessels. So Russia is in a very strong position. They're almost completely self-sufficient because of the enormous resources they have. Then look at us. We are not a continental power. We're only a continental power in the Western Hemisphere. You know, for us, it's thousands of miles that have to be traversed in order for us to reach the scene of action. Then in addition to that, we shipped out much of our industrial base in the 90s, and then again in the early part of this century, so that lots of people in Washington and corporate America and the ruling class could become billionaires and 100 millionaires and millionaires. Now we don't have much industrial capacity as it is, and what we do have resides, surprisingly, with the big five defense firms. Those big five defense firms are largely state-sponsored organizations. Without the government feeding them money, they don't have much alternative. It's not like it was in 1942, where you convert Ford from building cars to building tanks, and then after the war you go back to building cars. So we have a huge problem in that we can produce certain things, but we can't surge. That means that, yes, we've ramped up production of various things like artillery shells, and we're trying to produce more missiles, but we cannot surge. The Russians can surge. That means if Putin turns around and the minister of defense and the chief of staff say, we need 10,000 more of X and we need it by the end of the week, they'll surge. They may not get 10,000 out, but they'll probably get 8,000 copies of whatever it is that they need because they have the excess capacity and the labor directed from the center. We can't do that. And missiles and rockets, particularly the kinds that the Russians are using, take a lot of time to develop and produce. And I see you've got the article up there by Mackenzie Eaglin, another neocon and a big advocate for war everywhere. And she's telling the truth. We can't produce as rapidly as we need to. Does that mean we need to convert ourselves into a war mobilization state? Of course not. That's not what we want. We don't need it. But we think we do because most of our thinking is stuck in the early 20th century. This is 2024. The rest of the world is not interested in war, contrary to what the neocons tell us. They're busy trying to do business. There's a thing called the BRICS Summit. It hasn't even been covered in this country. There are 44 nations represented there and another 40 that want to join on top of what's already in there. What's it about? Well, it's about commerce and making money and marketing goods. How does it work? Well, you've got this Chinese Belt and Road that's not built for military power. It's built to ship products all over Europe and Asia and Africa, made in China. And that is a money-making machine that's being built, not a war-making machine. And everybody now realizes that and wants to jump on board the money-making machine. We could do something very similar in our own country. I wrote an article called The Golden Spike that was published in Washington Times back in 2017 or 2018. I can't remember which, and it talked about building high-speed transport at sea designed to bring goods from Asia and Europe to the United States and then put them on board high-speed trains and ship them back across the continent in very high-speed Atlantic and Pacific. And unlike the Chinese solution, it has to go through multiple nations where everybody has a handout. We're one country. We speak one language. So you're decreasing the time it takes to cross the vast expanse of Central Asia. Now, we're not in the game. We're too busy worrying about waging war in eastern Ukraine in a part of the world where we have no strategic interest and never have had such a one. Yeah, thank you, Gary. That's it. There it is. People need to look at that. I tried like all get out to get people in the Trump administration interested. They weren't interested. This is what we need right now. This should be part of Trump's platform. This would make him enormously popular because you're talking about developing the heartland, moving all these goods through vast areas that have been ignored, setting up supply and redistribution points for all sorts of products. What do we produce that nobody else does? You name it. We've got all sorts of things. We can produce things faster, better, cheaper, but we have to have infrastructure. What have we allowed to atrophy and deteriorate? Infrastructure. That's what this is about. That's what we should be about. Not war with Russia, not war with Iran, not war with China, for God's sakes.